You have investors that are also in the audience. And then you have buyers in the audience, and all of them look at the same event differently. If you're a founder, you have a vision, you have a narrative, you're like, I'm gonna go do this. And initially, you have investors that say, okay, I'll give you money, or I will make an investment in your company, but I'm looking at return. I'm looking at the risk I'm taking, the time frame when I get paid back. And then you have buyers that are looking at, well, what have you proven? What systems do you have in place? What are you doing that I can duplicate? You have to think like the buyer, not like the founder. The founder, you can talk about where you want to go. The buyer wants to know where you've been and the probability that I can continue this on.
Well, today on the Intentional Leadership Podcast, we have Scott Lundt of Freeman Lundt, an M&A advisor, and he's been doing it for probably over 20 years now. And they focus on the lower middle market of businesses, and they've been working to help businesses succeed in selling, but also determining whether it's the right avenue or not. So Scott and his team specialize in companies 20 million and under, and they will work anywhere in the U.S. So they're not limited to what state that you are in, and they're also not worried about what Wall Street worries about. They're looking at the best needs of who's selling and who's buying. So he and his partners are amazing. We've done a lot of work together, and let's go just dive in. Scott, welcome. How are you doing?
I'm doing awesome. Thanks for having me on this.
Yeah. So you specialize in the napkin numbers. You have the victory, valuation victory, and different things. But before we kind of get in and do some of those deep dives, tell me, how'd you get into this?
Oh, that's such a long time ago. So I've been in finance since 97. That's why I'm starting to get like the gray hair and everything on the side. And my business partner, we've been working together since 97. So in 2004, I'm just skipping ahead through all the minutia. Yeah. 2004, we said, hey, we want to do something more for our clients. We had a pretty big background in financing, more on the consumer side. And so for the next decade, really life happened. We got more skills, more experience, commercial lending background. And then in 2014, that's really when we solidified like Freeman Lundt. Because we were sitting at the table financing a lot of sales where people were going, hey, they'd throw us a deal and go, come on, can you get this financed? And next thing you know, they'd show up at the closing table and go, okay, thanks for the check. So what we wanted to do was help sellers go, there's this missing component of being able to walk people through this process and understand how they're transitioning from being business owners into going into their private lives, being retired or whatever the next chapter is in life. So really, I came into merger and acquisitions through the capital and more of the advisory role. And a lot of that work has been helping those owners understand, what you can finance or what buyers can actually underwrite to and how a business looks from the outside. So over that time, that decade period, what we naturally saw was that we were helping owners prepare for a sale or an acquisition because all of those questions are connected.
Right. And yeah. Good.
Well, and just to add on to that, you had asked me previously about why the space we're in, or kind of where we wanted to be. Why are we choosing not to do billion-dollar deals? And I think it's because most of the impact of the people we saw is really in that lower middle market mainstream space. So these were areas where once you get over about 20 million in enterprise value, there's all of these capital market groups that'll help you because they have annual quotas. Hey, I have to charge X amount of dollars to be able to still fill my quota and to do your deal. And if you were under that amount, a lot of people were saying, can you help me? And they would look around and there's nobody really to help. And we thought we could make a huge impact. There's a lot of good businesses where people generally were really good at swinging a hammer, pulling a saw. And next thing you know, they go, hey, I have 75 employees and it's been 35 years. And I was really good at this thing and I turned it into a business. Now what do I do? And they didn't have the right team of advisors. Maybe they had an attorney or they might have had a good CPA that gave them consultative advice, but they didn't know how to navigate this transition from all of these decades of having personal wealth tied up and locked up into a company and then saying, well, how do I move this into my retirement? And so that was meaningful for us to be able to help husbands and wives and families
I like
And that's
that.
where we
And
sit.
right. You're helping the average person who's had, above average success, or above average person that's worked really hard, and they're kind of navigating what's next, like you said. And it's a lonely place to be, to run and operate a business, but then it gets really lonely when you're trying to sell, and then, what's next. So was there, I mean, you mentioned that you're sitting around a table and you're going, wait, these people don't have any guidance. Was there a specific deal or transaction that you went, oh man, I could have helped these people? Or was it just an accumulation of a bunch of them?
I think it's that second part. It really wasn't like this one deal where we said, oh my gosh, we need to help these people. It was more of, I wonder why they didn't get that advice. And then the next person came up, they didn't get that advice either. And then the next person, it was just over time, we noticed that there seemed to be this area of opportunity where we could help people. And that was a little bit of that part that I kind of skipped over in the beginning when we first started working together. We had a consumer mortgage business where we were really big on giving consultative advice and helping people out, and have those same clients look at us and go, yeah, but guy down the street said he'd get me approved for this loan. And we're like, yeah, but you can't afford it. And over time, we started to shift into the more like, well, maybe the enterprise level clients, commercial clients, business clients are ones that appreciate more of that business. And when we moved into that space, that advice was very necessary. And that's where we love being.
Yeah, I remember that whole, the mortgage piece. I remember a boss once telling me, it's not your job to determine whether they can choose to afford the loan or not. It is your job to get the loan approved based on actual real information. And you just put it into the computer. When it spits out its answer, that's what you go by. Not, does it make sense for them as a consumer? And I was like, sheesh, what am I doing here? This is probably not the right place for me. So,
well, that was part of the problem in the early 2000s. See, gray hair, right? You just say, credit score. You didn't have to have income or assets or anything, and people were cutting checks.
Yeah. Well, so people have talked about the silver tsunami, the boomers, everything's, people are retiring. What are you seeing in that? Are you seeing anything specific, or is it just a made up media hype?
Oh no, it's very real. I think if you go online or you spend a little bit of effort researching it, you'll find there are tons of businesses that are for sale because of this huge baby boomer event where everybody's getting older and they're thinking about retirement or they're retiring. I started to first hear about this in like 2011. I had some time at Merrill Lynch, and during that period of time, they brought it up. And then when I was at KeyBank, they brought it up. It came up again at Wells Fargo. It came up at all of these institutions as they were going through and saying, look at this. This is a multi-trillion-dollar event that's going to happen in this wealth transfer. So it hits the headlines a lot, and it creates a pretty active market. You've got more sellers, maybe not as many buyers, but it's not really clean, I would say, the way that people imagine. Like there are a lot of owners that are say they're ready or close to ready to exit. But at the same time, you have all of that capital, like private equity capital. They're looking for the quality businesses. And sometimes that's not very apparent when you have a smaller business. I mean, small is subjective. You talk to SBA, it's 500 employees, which can be large. But that capital is very selective. They want to be able to see transparency, policies, procedures, operations. They're looking for as much uncertainty to be taken out of the picture as possible. I was talking to a private equity firm earlier this year, and they looked at about 1,000 transactions last year. They closed on 6, right? They had incoming calls. They're pretty well known. They're like, hey, people just call us. They go, hey, will you buy my business? It's great. Well, you're 99% great. But I'm looking for 100 because I have so many people calling me. There's so much business out there. So I think that kind of moves into this next part of you got to be ready. If you want to be somebody that's being considered, you have to get ready for the event and not just hope it happens one day.
Yeah, no, there's so many options out there for some of those companies, like you say, that if they're going to look at 1,000 and they're picking 6, that doesn't mean the other 900 odd companies are bad. It just means it doesn't fit their profile. And so there are other people that could take advantage of it, or there are different companies with different profiles. So I think people need to realize that it's not just, it's not easy, but at the same time, just because you're turned down by one doesn't mean you're going to be turned down by everyone.
Well, that's absolutely true, but it also leans into you got to be ready for the event.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a bodybuilder and you just show up and you haven't worked out a day in your life, they're like, you're going to lose. You can try it. Put in the effort. Say this is something that's meaningful. I think the percentage is, the last time I checked, something like 83% of people don't plan for the sale of their business. But you spend all this time planning in the beginning, and that's the Exit Planning Institute. So it's you'd spend all this time planning on this beautiful company you're going to build and all the things you're going to do, and then all of a sudden you say, one day I want to retire. How much effort did you put into that retirement strategy? And for most people that are running a business, every day they wake up and they eat, breathe, think, they wear all the hats in the business, and then they go, I need to sell, but this fire came across my desk today. I got to handle that. And next thing you know, they go, okay, it's been 20 years. So how do I do this? And I think that's part of what has to be. It doesn't have to be at the front of your mind, but you do need to consider that as you get closer to whatever your retirement horizon looks like.
Right. So planning is important. And I think we'll dive deeper into that in a second, but let's just, let's cover kind of generally globally, what's hot in the market, what's not, what industries are buyers fighting over. What does it look like right now?
Yeah, I think that one's easy, but this is biased by my perspective.
Sure. Yeah.
I think the strongest interest you see right now is really it, and I don't even know if it's right now. It's kind of like always been this way. You're finding businesses that have that durable demand, or an industry that's fragmented. So what that means is like business services. Do you have recurring revenue? Do you have maintenance that happens on an annual basis, or compliance, industrial services, specialty manufacturing, distribution, some kind of healthcare adjacent services? We're talking about companies like HVAC, electricians, electrical contractors, plumbers, those kind of things. Things that people need. When I'm hot, I want to be cold. I like to have running water. That infrastructure style type of companies, those more of the roll up your sleeves and get stuff done industries, those are in demand, and they're always in demand. And there are certain points in the economy where they're in more demand because we're in economic expansion. Not that we are right now, but when that happens, that's where they grow. That's where infrastructure comes into play. That's where people start building more. And all of those related industries start to feed into it.
Right. And that makes total sense and complete sense, especially with the advent of technology and the speed of which it's going right now. I think it's even more important. If you can get your hands dirty and have a team of people doing it, then it's tough to replace that. So, is financing hard right now? Is it tight? What does financing look like? And do you have to adjust any deal structures?
Yeah, that's a good question. Financing generally has an ebb and flow over time. Money gets looser, then underwriting credit guidelines tighten up, and then you feel like, hey, there's money for everybody. They're just printing it, and then it's like nobody can get any money. What really it comes down to is the quality of what's happening, because value is very subjective. I may look at a transaction, not the financing guy, but I'm the buyer, and then there's a seller, and we're saying, I've got a $10 million transaction, or you have a $10 million sale, and I'm looking at it and going, it's worth like $8 million to me. And then you say, well, but I have all of this institutional knowledge about my own company, and I know it's going to be fine over the next few years, but I can't prove that $2 million delta. So let's do what's called an earn-out, where I walk the mile with you. We hold hands and you say, I know this is going to happen. We define metrics, and all of a sudden I say, okay, if we do this, I get some of the upside and you get some of the upside, and then we close that value gap. Whereas a lender might look and say, the only thing I can verify is $8 million in value. And so there's different perspectives on how they look at that. Does that help?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I think that, you have a traditional bank that is going to do things a certain way. You have SBA that has, giving banks a little more freedom and flexibility based on size. And then you have the deal structure that could get creative, whether it's like you say, creating a $2 million delta by or eliminating it by having a earn out or some other unique structure there. So are banks scared right now in this market, or are they out of it, or is it private financing? Where are you finding most of the funds to make these happen?
Well, in the space that we play in, we generally see a lot of SBA transactions, especially now that they go up to 10 million. When we're doing transactions, we're up to about 30 million. But if you squeeze the bookends to it and you look at who we're really working with, they generally tend to be the upper end of that Main Street business. So we lean into the SBA guidelines. Now we still have private equity buyers. We still have private individuals, that we work with, or family offices. But in that space where you're seeing things tighten up a bit is when SBA changes their guidelines. And they're leaning more into, because of the changes they've made, we want buyers that are putting some money into the deal and to have some money in the bank in case things go bad. Right? Very reminiscent of these zero down loans that were happening in 2005 and 2006, where it's like, I just sign this piece of paper and I get a deal. If you dial this back several years, that's kind of what was happening with businesses. You could structure it with hardly any money into the deal, any money in the bank. And then 6 months later, you're struggling to get financing to keep the working capital in your business. And you're like, I don't know why things are so tough. On paper, it looks so good. And that's what they're requiring more. So that filters out some of the people that probably shouldn't have been buying businesses. People that didn't have reserves just in case, because tomorrow's not promised with business. And any business owner that sees this, they know that. They'll wake up in the morning with a plan, and then all of a sudden the plan gets caught on fire and disappears. Things are dynamic in business. Right. Especially when it comes to financing in this space, that's what they're looking at when you talk about things getting tighter or things being more restrictive. It's narrowing the buyer pool for anybody buying these types of businesses.
So it's narrowing it, meaning you just have to be planning to buy a business and not just show up and hope you can sign your name off. It's kind of like planning to sell. You need to be planning to buy.
Well, as a seller, you need to understand this, because if the person buying your company needs financing, what type of financing will they need? Right? And you have to have the right documentation for that. So if your financials aren't ready to present to a lender or for somebody through due diligence, you have to make sure that it's ready. Because if they look at it and they say, we can't finance this. We looked at your tax returns. We looked at your financial statements. We did the math. You can't pay the loan payment. Well, wait a second. We have all this other stuff we didn't put on our books. Well, that's going to make it tough to get it financed. So you have to be prepared to the outcome for what your ideal buyer looks like.
Yeah. How many times going along with that is, we may have done a lot of cash work, or, my grocery bill is zero at home, but boy, we buy a lot for the office. Some of those things, these small businesses kind of use, a little freedom and flexibility there. So what are, some deal killers? If we're moving towards the finish line, we're almost done. And, what's getting in the way now that the price is done, typically, what is getting in the way to kill a deal on that 11th hour on the 1 yard line?
But all these things just pop in my mind. Right?
Yeah. Fire them off.
But I want to say, what they all tie back to?
Yeah.
I think it's trust. So let me expand on that. You can quantify the price, right? You put it down, and as you go along during due diligence, you start to look at their financials. You start to look at their operations. You get a deep dive in everything. And maybe what you presented yourself one way, all of a sudden, I found some skeletons in the closet. And that can create that distrust or slow down momentum in the deal. If I lose confidence as a buyer, that affects how I look at the deal. And it could be pricing. I may want to retrade, change the price, add in, different type of metrics where we're doing an earn out, or now we have seller financing because the bank doesn't do it. So that with surprises, I think those are probably the biggest thing. And as somebody that's involved as an intermediary or a broker, our job is to help take all of those out of the closet and make them known up front. If there's a legal issue, put it on the table, talk about it, pros and cons, make sure the buyer knows, right? Frame it in a way that it's understandable. Oh, I see. You just got looped into this. It's not really part of it. We can covenant around that. We can put reps and warranties around it. We can put things in the contract that will take care of that issue. And now it's not an unknown anymore. It's something that we can solve together when we're looking at that problem. If there's an issue with the cash flow, talk through it, be able to explain it, be able to take it and say, here's the story behind the numbers. Now, one of the things that I learned a long time ago is if you have to tell too many stories, it's probably not what you can do, but you should still have a response. If somebody says, well, Scott, you're representing the seller, tell me about what happened here. And I'm like, I don't know. I never asked him that question. Do you want to buy it? I'm not really doing my job. I need to be standing in the shoes of the buyer and get as much of that out of the way as possible so we don't have issues down the road. There's nothing worse than being 4 or 5 months into a transaction and having the buyer say, I never do that. You never disclosed this to me. What else are you hiding?
Yeah, the transparency and trust and mitigating and or just being aware of the risk are 3 key factors. If people don't have the trust in what you're sharing, then they're going to walk away. Or if there's, if they feel like you're withholding information, like you say, a litigation or something like that's not shared, then those are deal killers along the way, potentially, but for sure on the 11th hour, if they start to accumulate and they start to build up, you can't get across that finish line. So one of these myths people talk about with that, and we'll close on this kind of brief, but my multiple's 5. I got 6. Well, I'm at 12, and well, I'm a SaaS. I'm at 22. Tell us a little bit about what moves that number, what's real, and just kind of give us your thoughts on that.
Yeah, multiples are a shortcut, right? So it's back of the napkin work that you're trying to figure out. Really, there's a bunch of math that goes into something, and the end result is a number divided by something else, right? And that turns into 5 times. 5 divided by 1 is 5 times, right? And so you're shortcutting all of the math and the people that are involved, the businesses that come up, and all of these different samples inside of this solution set, and saying it's worth 5 times. But what you're not taking into consideration in that range is where do you fall in that range, right? So there's a couple parts to this answer. It's one, if there's a range of value and you say, hey, it's 5 times. Well, I always like to say, well, if there's a middle line and you're consistently underperforming everybody that's in your peer group, you are probably in the lower part of that. And most sellers say, I'm the best thing since sliced bread. And most buyers are like, I want to buy you at the absolute lowest. But about understanding or getting that business intelligence about how you rank against your peers, it's helpful to start to form an opinion about where you should be in that range. Another thing is that multiples represent the risk involved. So if you take an industry that has high risk, and let's say the earnings represent how fast I want to get paid back, 5 times earnings, if you were to say that, then my expectation, high level, back of the napkin, is that I'm okay with waiting 5 years to make all my money back. If it's very risky, maybe I want my money back in a year. So let's say I'm in construction and I have to reinvent the wheel every single month. I've got to bid jobs and I've got to do all this stuff. And next thing you know, all the jobs disappeared. There's no contracts on the board. What am I left with? When you talk about SaaS revenue that maybe has 22 times, it's because perhaps they're tied to long-term contractual revenues that just keep going, right? If you look at real estate and you look at the cap rate, the inverse of that will give you a multiple, right? Back of the napkin. So now all of a sudden you're going, why am I paying 18 to 20 times, for real estate? Because everybody's boring is subjective, but it's there's no innovation. There's nothing happening. It's real estate. There's expenses. Yes. There's deferred maintenance, all that, but it's relatively stable and it's a long-lived asset. If I'm out bidding jobs as a consultant, I could lose everything tomorrow if I'm by the hour with no long-term contracts, right? There's more risk. I expect a higher return. And the higher return, the lower that multiple. So there's a number of things that are tied up into the simplification of its X times earnings. But overall, I mean, it's great for back of the napkin. You just have to understand there's more behind that is particular to you and your company.
Right. So it's easy to say, oh, it's 5X in this industry, but there's nuance. You are an overperformer, underperformer. You're in a market that is rural versus in the big city. There's so many different pieces of it. So that leads us to your valuation to victory. Your valuation to victory is one of the terms that you and I have used, or you use it and I hear it from you, I guess. And explain that to us and talk about your evaluation calculator.
There's a lot of different starting points of when people end up on my desk. And one of the ones that happens over and over again is the phone call I get that says, what am I worth? Which is really not the question that they're asking, but it's how it starts. It's they're talking to their financial advisor, they're talking to their CPA, their attorney, their close relationships in life. And they start talking to them about, hey, I think I want to retire. And that question actually pops up. Well, what do you think you're worth? I have no idea. And the next thing you know, they're talking to Scott. There's other drivers behind that. What am I worth? But understanding where you're worth today helps to start the planning process. If I'm talking to my financial advisor and I said, hey, this Scott guy that I met told me I'm worth $5 million. And then your CPA says, well, let's take out some taxes. We got your basis. Here's what you're left with. And your financial advisor goes, oh, you can live the rest of your life exactly how you wanted to do it. Doing all the things, all the events, all the lifestyle that you created in your mind when you close your eyes and you think of retirement with $3 million. Oh, then I'm good. And we see that as a trigger, right? For a catalyst for somebody making that psychological decision of, why am I still doing this if I could be retired tomorrow? When you don't know, you just keep on working, right? When there's an unknown, I've seen it. I've seen people get in their business, they go, I think I need $10 million, but they'd never asked anybody. It was just a number they created in their head. And they said, I need to make 10 million. They didn't look at tax efficiencies. They didn't look at selling. They didn't do any planning. And then all of a sudden, when they do the planning, they consistently, the answer is, well, why am I still doing this? Let's get out tomorrow. I'd rather sit on a beach than sit here and deal with customer complaints all day. But I didn't know that this is what I needed to do. So that valuation step is really that front line. We help business owners understand what they're worth today and why. We identify things that might be hurting the value, right? And then we start making practical work lists, right? We got to clean up financials. You got to reduce your owner dependency, document systems, strengthen your management, whatever that needs to happen. We had a client where when I first met him, he was referred to us because his attorney looked at his unsolicited offer. And he said, I don't know that this is a good deal. And we walked through it and he did some information, some analysis, and he basically could sell for a lot more. But the reason why they offer, well, first they lowballed him, but the reason why he was going to be limited at this time is because he had the front line and then it was him. He didn't have any levels of management. He was working 60, 70 hours a week. It was just his job. He'd been there for 35 years. And 3 years later, when we sold his company, it was double than the unsolicited offer he got. He was removed from the company. He had policies and procedures. He had systems in place. He had promoted up his management team. And he was hard to get a hold of. And we would give him a call and say, where are you at? I'm in Spain for 2 weeks. I'm out fishing in Argentina for the next 3 weeks. I was on the Amazon going for like Corona. And I was like, you got to come back. You got to respond to these questions for due diligence. But it was great because it showed that the business worked without him. And he had taken the time to institute all of that. So that valuation to victory is really, it's about understanding where you're at today, the timeline of what you have till your tomorrow, and how do we get you there?
I love that. Yeah. And I think that's important for people to realize is that what they want to sell for versus what they need could be different, and always usually is. I was talking to somebody that was interested in selling, it was just a couple of days ago actually, and their number was exactly what you said. I need 10 million. I said, why do you need 10 million? Well, because I think that's the number I need. I said, well, why don't we sit down, figure out what you really think let's determine what you do need and what does that look like. And then we also need to look at the business and how do we get it to be worth the 10 million potentially, or is it already there? And in their case, it was worth significantly more. It's a great business, large, thriving business. And this magic number was just a random number. And I said, well, can I buy it for that price? He's like, what do you mean? I said, I'll go get $10 million and buy your company. He's like, well, what do you, I said, I think I'll do that. And he said, whoa, slow down. I said, well, what do you think it's worth? I said, probably closer to 30. He's like, oh. So you mean I have enough money to retire? I said, I think you probably do. But he'd been working 60 years in the same business and done a great job of, like he had the ability to go, he didn't choose to, but go chase piranhas or whatever he wanted to do. And the team ran the company. And it was a large company. So I think people need to make sure they marry their needs with what the value of the business is. And so what's that?
I was going to say, I think that story just reinforces like what I said earlier is you've got to put that planning in place. Mm-hmm. You're saying the same message. It's if you don't know, get people that know, right? And put them around you and get a good team of advisors. And if you don't know who to get around you, here, you've got two people right here on this call. So,
well, yeah, exactly. And one of the things that you and I talk about, and we're not trying to be disparaging to attorneys and CPAs or whoever, but oftentimes your current, and this is for the business owners out there, your current CPA doesn't have enough experience in a transaction. Oftentimes your existing attorney doesn't have experience in business transactions, and you really need to have a team around you, a team of advisors, people on your side to come together and help you. Because if you don't, the other people probably do. And if you're going to go to if you're going to play a football game, you want to have all 11 guys on the field, not just have, you and one other person sitting there, or 3 different rookies, in key positions. So I think it's critical that you surround yourself with team of people to support it. And just like you're here, you're not getting paid. I think that's something also to say, you're not getting paid unless the deal closes. We're not getting paid if we don't perform. So that's unique in this world as well.
Well, and I want to add a little bit to that too, is just asking the question sometimes to your attorney or CPA. Mm-hmm. Do you feel comfortable with an M&A transaction? We had a client once that they had 2 attorneys and they had 2 CPAs. And we asked them that question and both attorneys said nope. And the 2 CPAs said no. So because one of the attorneys was in-house counsel, right? Just going through all of their stuff. They did a lot of government contracts. The other was an external attorney that basically gave them advice on the government contracts. So they were working, it sounded like they were doing the same thing, but we had asked them, they were actually working in parallel on 2 different facets of the business. But neither of them felt comfortable walking through a transaction for the sale of the company. Same thing with the CPAs. They had an actual CPA that was doing all the bookkeeping work and internal policies and procedures, and they had somebody on the outside doing their taxes, but neither of them wanted to manage the transaction for the M&A.
Well, I think that's great that they acknowledge that, because sometimes, you and I have run across them where they think, oh, well, it can't be that hard. I'll figure it out. And we want people that have got the experience to help out. If the final question on this one, and we'll move on to that topic, but if you want to, if I'm the owner of a business and you come in, what are a couple of things that you're saying, okay, these are typical risk issues that buyers will identify? One we know is it's too dependent on the owner. Are there one or two others that you say, okay, you need to go and get rid of these hidden risks so that the buyers are more comfortable?
If I had to pick just two to add on to that, it's making sure you have good financials. Financials that represent accurately the story you're trying to convey, right? Not stuff you just make up. I mean, if you see financials, and this happens when you have husband and wife businesses and smaller businesses in our space, there'll be a line item that says, ask my accountant. Do not have things like that on there with a bucket of like $300,000. Ask my accountant, what is this? It's a red flag. Also, document your systems, policies, and procedures. Take that information up here of how to run your business and put it on paper, right? Because if you make grandma's cookies and I'm buying your company because I want to make grandma's cookies, don't tell me it's all up here. I just guess every time I make it. I want something that is disciplined, systematic. I want to reduce the variability in the outcome. So I want to know, I preheat the oven to 350 and I just go right down the list. And now out comes grandma's cookies. So document your systems that you use. Yeah. Those two things will go a long way.
I agree. In financial statements, as the bankers that we were, that's critical, because you're going to be talking to too many people that have, a lot of time and energy and focus on that. So, make sure they're accurate. So, well, let's move to something that's a little more relevant and hot right now. And that is, the modern business and AI. Does AI move this multiple? How does it, are buyers actually looking at businesses and saying, hey, they're using AI or they're not using AI, and then making a determination on whether they want to pursue the business or not?
So AI is a tool, and we have to think about it like any other tool. People are not just automatically paying more because you have AI in your name or in your policies or procedure. Oh, you use AI? Perfect. I'm going to pay you another turn. I'm going to pay you another multiple, right? They're paying attention to whether AI is creating measurable improvements in your business, right? And most of it's back office. So funny thing is, I had a call right before this, and I was talking to a family office that their entire background is like computers and information systems, and they're really big into AI. And when they buy companies, they reduce administrative burden. They're like, how do we make it more efficient? How do we use this to improve the processes or state the processes or increase efficiency? When you're using AI as a tool to make you a better version of you as a company, then it can be meaningful, because now you can see it. If you have your monthly financials, you can say, we instituted this policy. Now we're noticing we're more efficient. We've reduced our headcount, or we've increased our revenue because we've reallocated resources within our company. So you really need to think about it as, am I using it as the right tool to move my company forward? And to give you maybe a frame of reference back to the gray hair thing, there was a time when Excel was the big new tool. I remember when I was young and I started off at a civil engineering company, we had a spreadsheet, literally a long piece of paper spread out on a sheet. You had to fill in everything. And when Excel came along, some people said, oh, this is great, let me learn it. And other people said, can never catch on, not really big on it. 10, 15 years later, if you didn't understand or use Excel as a tool, it puts you at a disadvantage because you couldn't create models. I mean, I use it every day, and there's so many people that use it in their daily life. I know tons of larger contractors that use that to manage their WIP or RFQs or anything that they're doing, which to me, I was like, well, why can't I use other software? Because I understand Excel, I'm using it. It's a tool that if you use it correctly, can enhance your business. You just have to spend the time to say, what am I really using it for? And implementing that. So there's no magical, you make more money because you have AI, but you could be making more money and becoming a more efficient company, which then in turn would generate a higher sales price if you can use AI as a tool to lift you.
Right. And that's what we, I kind of mentioned to you, we in one of our companies hired a firm to come in and do an AI audit of the operations. And they came in and found operational issues that would ultimately lift the value of the company, but also made the company more efficient, eliminated a bunch of bottlenecks. And so we used AI, and ultimately I'm now a partner of that company because I thought it was so valuable. And we're doing it now for a few others, but we went in and identified one of the smaller ones. And these are companies, 8 million, 20 million, 15 million, say roughly 10 to 50 million. We've identified savings on the lowest side of $250,000. And on the high side, we're at 746, and we're still finding some more now that we're digging in, and we're there on month 2, and we're finding more. So imagine using AI to put, like you just said, it's a tool to identify the bottlenecks, identify your inefficiencies, document your processes and procedures, and minimize the risk for the buyer. And oh, by the way, you've thrown another $500,000 on the bottom line. Multiply that times 5.
Remember, not multiply by 5.
Oh, yeah, right.
Actually, you know what's funny is I totally forgot that you were doing that with the AI, but without remembering that, it still reinforced what I said. And you're doing exactly that. You're not just saying I have AI. You're saying I've become a better company,
right,
through the use of this tool, which in turn makes me more valuable to somebody who wants to buy me.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Oh, so deal fatigue. Is it real?
It is absolutely real. And it happens a lot when people lose momentum. And momentum can be lost in a number of ways. And I think a lot of that has to do with setting the right expectations. So for most people, this is the largest investment they have. They've never gone through and sold something like this before. In their mind, all they can do is attach it to the next largest investment they ever did, which was buy a house.
Mm-hmm.
And they anchor their expectations to that. And if you don't take the time as an advisor to say, let me tell you how this works, and let me give you the path that you're about to walk, and let me talk about the emotional roller coaster or the reason why you have to be urgent in your responses, they will they're working 40, 50, 60 hours a week in their business, right? That is their number one concern because that's what pays the bills. And you will ask them, hey, I need you to get me this financial information for your updated financials. And they go, okay, I'll get to it. And 3 weeks goes by. And now the buyer is like, you must not be serious. You must not want to sell, right? Or you'll have an attorney that, and I'm not picking on anybody, I'm just thinking about a recent deal where you ask the attorney to do something, and the next thing you know, it's been 2 weeks, and then it's been 4 weeks, and you're like, hey, they're on vacation, and you're like, hey, man, we're losing momentum. And it turns back into, are you not serious? It goes for buyers and sellers, right? When that momentum starts to slow down and urgency starts to disappear, people get frustrated. And that's that deal fatigue. And having expectations helps. Like when I talk to people, generally for these sizes of deals, we're looking at around 2 to 3 months to have a purchase and sale written up. And I like to set that expectation up front because I've seen this plenty of times. A buyer says, here you go. I can do that, no problem. Here's a purchase and sale. I just wrote it. Perfect. Well, all you got to do is sign it. And then we're good. We're done in 1 day. No, their attorney looks at it. They redline it. Next thing, you go back and forth. Usually every time you hit the ball back across the net, you're a week and a half, right? You got to have time to receive it. That's not the only thing you're working on. They've got to review it. They've got to get the client. They've got to advise and then create new red lines and send it back. That takes time. And even people that are on the same page, that are moving as fast as they can, it magically still turns out to be 2 to 3 months. I've had clients where this was a guy a couple of years ago. He was getting really frustrated. I had to keep reminding him, hey, man, I told you 2 to 3 months. We finished around day 75. And I'm like, wow. It's just like you said. Okay, you're right. and that emotion kind of started to dissipate. He was like, oh, okay, it is taking this. It is doing this. And it's because I told him up front when he got frustrated after like 2 or 3 weeks. I think this is part of the process. Having those expectations will help with deal fatigue, but it's definitely something that you have to manage actively during the process. And that's part of the role as the advisor, is if so, whoever the intermediary or broker is representing you should be helping push that along.
So, I agree 100% that the advisor's job is to be the positive cheerleading, push the deal through, even if it's not going anywhere, but let it feel like you're giving it a shove. Are you able to control the other side? So whether you're the buying, person buying or the person selling, how do you help try and keep the momentum going from the other side?
That's a good question. There's so much you can do. And a big part of it in the beginning would be setting expectations, like having a kickoff meeting and setting milestones. And if you go past the milestones, treating it like business. We're not just all hunky-dory trying to be friends. That's a benefit. It's more of, we set this expectation, we would receive this by this day. We haven't. So what's our plan B? Right? And if you don't set plan B and then plan C and being able to think through experience and think through the transaction, I'm a participant then in now this deal fatigue. Mm-hmm. It's okay to have delays and lender requests and things that come up and you're like, what is this? But part of our job is not just to be that positive cheerleader to get on calls and get people to move forward, but to anticipate they're going to need this financial information. Your bank is going to want this. You've got vehicles and they got an SBA loan and they're going to transfer them. There's collateral information that they are going to ask for, even if they haven't asked for it yet. Because by doing that in advance, like they're going to need the VIN, the make, the model, they're going to need the color, they're going to need the mileage, they're going to need title, registration. Well, you could put all that together ahead of time if you know that they're going to ask for that, right? And the banker may say, I don't need that yet because the underwriter didn't tell me to get it. I already know you're going to need it. So we put it all together and then magically after underwriting looks at it, they need it. If you don't ask that, here's where it can be a problem. Hey, I'm in construction. It's June. All my vehicles, all my equipment are out in the field. You want me to go hunt down all of that information? I don't know when I have time to do that. And then everybody's going to look at me like, why am I taking pictures of the vehicles, the registration? Get it done ahead of time. They could have done that in January, right? When it was slow season and everybody was off. So part of it is, yes, we help manage that process, but also anticipate the things that will be necessary to have it ready so due diligence goes smoother.
Yeah, we've talked about that on more than one occasion where here is a checklist of all the items we're going to need and go get them now so that this equipment list isn't holding us up in month 3 or month 4. We do it today, like you said, in January when you're slow and you have all the vehicles sitting on a lot, locked in a gate versus scattered across 3 states. And it's important for helping with the just the trust of the bank at that point too. Hey, look, I already did that, or I already have that. You don't necessarily have to give it to them, but you're just holding on to it, waiting for it, and then say, oh yeah, we'll go grab that. Boom. Now you just built trust with that speed. So one question, the next thing is, we've talked about the deal fatigue, and then people are coming to you and saying, hey, what's my business worth? Because that's what the first question they're going to ask. What I like that you do, and I think it's a critical thing that we talk about, is it's not what's my business worth, it's are you ready to sell, or am I ready to sell? How do you help a founder figure out, hey, yeah, I'm ready to sell? What's that look like?
That involves asking those questions. It may seem simple, but it's talking through the drivers for them right now. Like, why is the right time now? So when you start a business, let's make a line here. This is time, right? And then you start with 0 sales, and over time, right, you're getting more and more sales. You're like, yeah, I'm making businesses, I'm making sales. Then it starts to curve down in your business life cycle. And this is where I end up seeing people. Would they have a choice? They can reinvest time, money, effort, and go up. Or they could say, hey, I don't want to do that, and I'd rather just sail off in the sunset. And I think helping people realize where they're at on this business life cycle is important. There are people that are interested in understanding where they're at, but they go, hey, I've had 10 more years of work in me. And then I've had people that say, I'm ready to go today, or I have a health issue, or something came up. And there's a difference between planning for an event, being and selling on your terms, because hey, if I don't get the right offer today, I can wait 2 years. I'm good. My daughter graduate in 3 years. That was my end point. So I'm just looking for something good along the way. That's a lot different than I have to sell tomorrow. Can you liquidate everything and find me a buyer? Right?
Yeah.
So going through that and helping them understand where they're at and the things that are important to them. So when the decision comes up, they look at it and say, yes, this is a good transaction. Now is the right time because. We had a client exactly. They looked right at me and said, Scott, what do you think about this deal? I mean, I could sit this out. I could do ABC. And we just ran through their list of all the things that weren't emotional. When I was in the moment, you're making that emotional decision. Should I buy this? And we just ran through everything they told me. Well, what was important for you? We walked through that list. We walked through the personal things that were important, the next steps they wanted to do in life. And they were like, you're right. And it wasn't that I was right. I just held the mirror back up with all the things they had written on that mirror themselves and helped them to understand, this is the right time. And sometimes it's a trigger. It's their life event. I had a husband and wife that were selling a franchise. They had 3 locations. And you could tell they had different roles because when we sat down with them, the husband was like, I'm ready to sell. It's like Eeyore. His whole body was like, let's go, let's sell today. And the wife was like, I could do this forever. I've got all this time. And then a couple of years later, I get this phone call. And we had stayed in touch over the time, but all of a sudden it was like, the wife called and said, I'm ready to sell. It's like, oh, okay, and what changed? What's different? My granddaughter and I just went to Spain, or just went to, they were traveling now. So my granddaughter's 5. She's the best thing in the world. Her life changed. She had a next step. And she was like, now is the right time. So that entire next step of, should I even sell right now? Sometimes it's not even money. It's just understanding those things that are important, and that evolves over time. However, taking the time to write it down, saying where I'm at today, walking through those efforts, that's meaningful. That's how you get for this event.
And so they're getting through the event. They're thinking, okay, this is my family side of it. What about the culture of the business? Can you go out and find the highest bidder and still retain your culture? Or do you need to, take less money as the business owner so that you can maintain the culture and keep your team intact? What does that look like? What have you seen?
I rarely, after we get the value out of the way and say, here's your value, and then we start going through the list of everything about their company, the top dollar question rarely comes up, because it starts to transition into, shoot, I'm actually retiring. But what about Bob, Mary, and Joe? They've been with me 20 years. This business wouldn't be what it is without them, and they can't retire. And they start to become more and more concerned. The sellers are now going, well, here's our culture. Here's what we've been doing for the last 35 years. I'm kind of looking for somebody that's going to continue that on, at least in a majority part. And they get very interested in the transition of the culture to the point where it's not really the price anymore. It's really the structure of the deal and the person that's coming out on the other end to buy them. And that's why I like to tell people is I get to this part in the sales process where now I'm like a matchmaker. Like, you're trying to marry your daughter off. You want to meet the husband. You're like, well, who is this guy? You can take care of my daughter when I'm gone. That kind of thing. And it becomes really important where I have to be able to understand the culture so I can look at the buyer, the potential buyer, and say, yeah, you're not a good fit before they even meet the seller. And that's a big part of it is, and that's one of the top 3 C's that we have. We have cost. What's this going to cost me? Confidentiality. Are you going to put a sign in front of my business and everybody's going to know? Or continuity. What happens after the sale? And that becomes one of the most important things as we move along the process, is what's going to happen to all of these 30 people that have become like family to me. So I don't know that I run into that situation a lot where you have this founder top dollar and the right home for the team. I think what happens is it starts with, how much money am I going to get? And they figure that financial equation out on their own. And then but if I have the right team, it's good enough. Mm-hmm. Usually they've been doing well up to that point, and they've had other investments or they've done other things. And it becomes less about, hey, I made another 500,000 and more about, I got 10 million, and I got the right person that's going to lead this for the next generation.
Got it. Quick, it just made me think of a transaction or opportunity that I came across yesterday, and it's an ESOP. Are you working with more ESOPs now than ever, or you don't touch them? What's your thought on an ESOP right now?
It's funny. The very first commercial lending transaction I did was an ESOP. And it was very complex. We had a separate ESOP advisor. I think they're an option, like anything else. You have a universe of options. I always tell people, put the bad ones on there first. You can go bankrupt and go out of business tomorrow. And they're like, I'm not doing that. Okay, cool. Well, that's an option, but you just don't want to do it. And we walk through the rest. For ESOPs, I am not an ESOP specialist. I know enough to be dangerous. And if it's something that somebody really wants to consider, we would draw in people and help them flesh out that opportunity for them. What I tend to see, there's metrics out there that employee own. You have more confidence, more excitement about your company. You're part owner, so you're like, hey, I want to do more. I want to put in extra hours, the quality, whatever it is. There are metrics that show that it improves, so it's a good thing. It tends to be one of those things that also is a ready, able buyer if the structure works. These guys already have knowledge of the company, so they understand the risk more so. But they're looking at the benefit. Now I'm part owners. Mm-hmm. It also tends to be the highest dollar when you do a sale. So I'm looking for a built-in buyer where I can get the most money out as a seller. There's some tax advantages. I'm probably not framing it to all the best light it could be, but I also know there's post-closing requirements for Department of Labor and things like that. As an ESOP, you really have to sit down and say, here's what it looks like. Here's what it means, pros and cons, just like anything else, and say, is that the best thing for my plan? That's what it comes down to. When I'm choosing the options of how I transition out, does this work best compared to selling it, compared to handing it off to family members, compared to shutting the doors down one day and just not caring? Look at all of the different options that work best for me, and then choose the one that works for me and my family.
Perfect. Well, you led into the last of that piece was the family, the succession plan. What we talk about that. Give us your thoughts on that, and how does that work?
Well, I have seen different shades of this throughout my time.
Hello.
I think the biggest mistake is you assume it's automatically easier or better, right? When it comes to, hey, I want to give it to my kids. I had this guy selling his steel fabrication business. And one of the first things I asked is like, okay, well, who do you have working for the company? He's like, I got some family members. I'm like, oh, great. Okay. And they give me the story. Like, well, how come you haven't sold it to them? He's like, I tried. My son was so excited. His wife was not, because they saw how much time he put into the business and all the missed opportunities with family and friends and everything because he was working so much. He's like, I finally got to a part where I'm not working so much, but the memory that they had was, this will be your life. Mm-hmm. And so even though he was excited to carry on the company with dad's name and the family name, he was like, yeah, ultimately, that's not the life I want to live. And that's okay. There are some people that they're up for the challenge and want to carry it on, others that don't. But you have to have that conversation. You can't automatically assume that somebody in the family wants it, or they'll be capable of it.
Right.
It's important, And if the family has a fair plan for ownership, control, compensation, maybe it works out. But you just have to talk through it. It's like any of the other option. And if you're looking and saying, well, I want to hand it off to the next generation, right? That's the decision I want. Then you have to ask yourself as a seller, did I give them enough time and authority in the business to know that they can really handle this? See, it's different. When you're the one that created it from nothing but a hammer, you had all the drive. You had kids in diapers who were like, oh my God, if I don't get this job, they're not eating, right? When you're handed something that works, you have to look at the people you want to pass it off to. Do they have that same drive or enough of a drive to continue on the legacy of this company? And you have to be honest, because the worst thing you want to do is say, I'm going to give it to my kids. The kids fail. Or they only get along with dad or mom is around, right? Because they were the authoritative figures. And so you really have to have them in a position where you trust them to make those decisions, to make a decision where the company could have a bad outcome, but they are responsible for it because they're an owner. And if that means in a leadership role or something in the, where they're on the ground floor, where they have staff that says, okay, I would follow them, not just because they're related to the current owners, but because they've proven themselves to me, that makes a difference for that success when you pass it down to the next generation.
Right. Yeah, I think conversations need to be held, and the entire family too. Whether people are involved or not in it, they all need to be part of that conversation to make sure there isn't some hidden issue or a problem. So now, if I'm a founder and I'm listening to this, we're going and I'm questioning, okay, I'm not ready to sell quite yet, or maybe it's 3 years or 5 years. What do I need to do to make sure I am ready? What does Scott say? Okay, I need to do this. I'm going to go do this, to get myself ready so I can call Scott up.
Sure. Well, I think run your business like you're going to sell it someday, right? And prepare for that. I'll give you a quick list here, but we were speaking at Venture Black at UW and talking to a bunch of founders that investment money, like angel investors and so forth. People had taken like millions of dollars in seed round or series, A or so forth. And they have the founder mentality. Then you have investors that are also in the audience. And then you have buyers in the audience, and all of them look at the same event differently. If you're a founder, you have a vision, you have a narrative, you're like, I'm going to go do this. And initially, you have investors that say, okay, I'll give you money, right? Or I will make an investment in your company, but I'm looking at return. I'm looking at the risk I'm taking, the time frame when I get paid back. And then you have buyers that are looking at, well, what have you proven? What systems do you have in place? What are you doing that I can duplicate? You have to think like the buyer, not like the founder. The founder, you can talk about where you want to go. The buyer wants to know where you've been and the probability that I can continue this on. So if you think about it like that, then some of the items that I'm going to lay out right now they're true to other questions we've had already. You want to have financials. You want to document your process. You want to diversify customers, right? Have really good reporting. Whether you sell or borrow or bring in a partner or whatever tomorrow, those kind of items are super important because they make your business a business, and it doesn't lock it all up in here. It puts it out where you can make yourself obsolete and sell it to somebody else.
I agree. Yeah. It comes back down to having good documented operational systems and financial statements. So, what's one piece of advice, that you would give a business owner to just say, okay, if you're going to exit, you're in the thick of it. What's one thing you say to them that says, go ahead, fight through it, and this is how we're going to get there so you can live your most intentional life post the exit?
Don't wait until you're tired to start preparing. The best exits, they usually happen when the owner still has energy, when you're still able to wake up in the morning, be excited about the business you have. The business is performing well. And if you're made aware of things that need to be fixed, you have time to fix them. So if you wait until the last minute, that creates so many problems or potential for so many problems because you're exhausted. You've got to that point where you don't want the business anymore. You hit deal fatigue week one, right? How come they haven't cut a check yet? Or the business could reach a spot where it's not performing because you don't have the energy to drive everybody, right? I've had businesses where they start to get senioritis, and not like old person. I'm talking like high school, right? They're just like thinking, yeah, I'm going to sell. So I take my foot off the gas because I'm kind of tired anyways. And then the business starts to not perform in a way that now the buyer says, is this the new you? And if you sell on a down year, that's probably the worst negotiating position to get yourself in. So if you don't have to sell tomorrow, start off, get a status quo, whatever your business is worth. Try to find out that, because I think it gives you a good starting point for talking to all of your other advisors. You could figure out what drives value, what could reduce it, and it gives you that mental game plan, if you don't write it down, that you have direction now. And that'll give you options. And having options, that's what creates positive leverage for you at M&A.
And with that, if they're going to do that, how do they get a hold of you? How do they find your calculator? What's the best way to get a hold of you? And what's your URL, your website?
Yeah, this is where the ad rolls across the screen, and it's my website.
That's right. Yeah. We're going to put it on the lower thirds right below your black sweatshirt, so everybody can see it.
Yeah, the best way is through Freeman Lundt. We made it to be the way people consume today is really, they do a lot of that online. All right. And when it comes to selling your business, not everybody wants to get on the phone and talk to somebody. So we invested in Biz Equity. And so now we've got their valuation engine on our website. So, and we have it set up so you can actually get a range of values through your own input. You get on there, you don't have to talk to anybody. You type in some financial data if you have a problem or you don't understand. You can actually have email your CPA to do it, email us, we could do it. But you can really get on there by yourself, figure out a range of where you might be, and give you a starting. There's no cost to it. We're not going to call you unless you want us to. If you want an actual written report, well, then we got to get in touch. But outside of that, you can do a lot of pre-work and just get that ballpark, which will help your financial advisor plan out that retirement number for you.
Well, I've done that calculator a couple of times for fun for clients, and I find it highly valuable, and I don't mind people calling. And I think that people, if they're going to plan, if they're a founder, if you're looking at selling your company and you just want to talk and learn more, Scott would be a great place to start. And he won't charge you right away for everything he's doing. He's going to give you some guidance that is free, and he can give you these tools as well. So reach out to Scott at Freeman Lundt, and we'll put those all in the show notes. And thanks, Scott, and thanks everybody for listening.
Graham, thanks for having me on here.